Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well, thanks. I think we're just giving it a little bit of time. Only a few people registered for today's call, so it might just be us, a few of us here. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe what do you think, Mary? Should we get started or
Yeah, to
what
get
do you want?
started, I think small groups like this, 4 people, is a decent start. And it always seems like 1 or 2 people come in as they have time. So,
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I'll kick off and give a little bit of an intro of myself, and this is just a very like casual, open discussion, so we can really talk about, whatever is top of mind for everyone. I'd love to kind of learn a little bit about, who you are and what you're working on. So I'm Shetal Shah. I am the lead customer marketing manager at Culture Amp. Culture Amp is a employee experience HR platform. Um, I lead our expansion marketing efforts there. I've been there for about 3 years, and so my main focus is really driving demand for our existing customer base through, demand gen activities and also account-based marketing activities. Prior to that, I have a demand gen background. I was at SurveyMonkey working on the pre-sale side of things. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about me. I know since this is a small group, maybe we can do some quick intros. Hi, Mariah, welcome. We're just getting started. So I will popcorn it to James, if that's okay with you.
sure. James Lustenader. I'm at PlanView, uh, Director of Customer Marketing. So, got the retention marketing team and the customer advocacy program
Nice.
under my purview, and then a dotted line to our digital customer community as well.
Great. Nice to meet you, James.
You too. Mariah, you're up.
Hi. And unfortunately, I do have another call at 9:30, but I'll try and be on for what I can. My name is Mariah Lenahan. I actually am at SurveyMonkey.
Oh,
I'm the
nice.
senior manager of customer marketing there. I have a team of three. One is focused on kind of education and engagement initiatives, one focused on advocacy, and one on expansion. Yeah, we do a lot of different things in those areas that touch on kind of all parts of, customer marketing and always very busy. But yeah, I'm sorry, I may have missed the prompt. Was there anything else you wanted me to share?
No, we're just doing some quick intros. So, yay, nice to meet you, Mariah. Awesome to hear that you're at SurveyMonkey. I'm so curious to hear what you're working on.
Yeah, yeah, no.
Tammy, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So I'm Tammy Connolly. I actually work at Point of Reference. So Reference Edge is our tool. I'm an account director. So I just kind of like sitting in on some of these things to see, if I get some good ideas for my clients and things like that. So
Nice. Welcome. Oh, and we've
thanks.
got one more person joining us. Hi, Colleen.
Hey, how are you? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for doing this. This is great.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for being here. I always love these small groups because we really can just dig into whatever we feel like talking about. So, we were just giving intros. Do you want to give us a quick intro of who you
Sure.
are and what you're working on?
Yeah, Colleen Reidy. I lead the customer marketing and advocacy at Vericode in Burlington, Mass. I've been focused on advocacy for the last maybe 8 years or so, but now I'm taking on the customer marketing role as well. So super excited to learn more about expansion and renewals and all that. And hopefully we'll get to some of that today. But always
Awesome.
always love learning from these groups, sharing and learning.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
I was just telling the group before we kicked off was these are pretty informal. There's really like no presentation. It's very much an open discussion. Sometimes the discussion leans heavily in one specific topic. Other times we kind of go all over the place with different topics. So, I'm happy to kick off with a prompt unless there's something specific someone would like to bring up that's top of mind that you're working on. I know in the past we've talked about like successful campaigns or reporting challenges or how other people are reporting for expansion marketing or any kind of like innovative tactics or programs that your team has ran that you've seen success with. We've talked about account-based marketing for customers. So any topics that anyone would like to bring up to the table, and we can kind of dig in that way. Anything top of mind?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm off camera only because I'm trying to eat my lunch and I don't want to do that to anybody. But yeah, I mean, if nobody else has any dying need to learn about things, I would love to know what folks are doing for, customer retention or expansion campaigns. I mean, I have my sort of like evergreen, I have a monthly showcase where we talk about products and, but I feel like it's just, same old, same old. And I'm, trying to get like some ideas about getting customers to connect with each other. And it's really hard to do virtually, but I'm learning it's really hard to do in-person events too on a local level because folks are just they don't have the bandwidth to get out of the office for half a day or whatever. So I don't know, maybe it's meetups without, but I feel like when I do the meetup thing, I don't really get a lot of trackability to say, okay, if this is a good investment of our time and resources. So, love to hear what folks are doing to sort of get some engagement going because I'm not having any luck yet.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And we're actually dealing with a similar challenge right now with some of the end of the year like retention plays. We're really lean heavily on events to target some of our upcoming renewal customers. And so we do a lot of experiential events or, for some of our more strategic accounts that are coming up for renewal, but we're also facing a similar challenge of it's that time of year where everyone's busy. It's a little bit, the holidays are coming up. And so trying to get folks to these events is a challenge. And then, we do our like annual, like kind of marquee events. And around those marquee events, we have like customer specific events where what we call culture first forums. And so it's very targeted to customers and some prospects where we have like really educational value-based content. But those are, just on an annual level. Sometimes it's once a year, sometimes it's twice a year. But some of the quarterly initiatives that we're trying to spin up, we're definitely noticing like a decrease in registrations of folks. So we're also facing a similar challenge. So I'm curious if anyone has cracked the code there or is doing anything else that's out of the box from a renewals perspective or retention perspective.
What is the engagement rates? What do they look like? Or maybe even how much are customer success teams helping?
It's a good question. It depends on if it's like a hosted event versus like an in-person event. And so hosted, we're always looking for like a 35 to 40% attendance rate. But in person, it really varies on the event. Like it could be like a 10-person event, it could be a 20-person event. And yeah, CS does get involved in like doing some outreach. We leverage our account managers quite a bit to do some of the invites as well. And then depending on the event, we'll have either an account manager or CS representative at those events. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've
We're
been told to like not bother our account team, let them sell, like stop asking them to help you do things.
We're looking at how to do communities of practice, what we call in communities of practice in 2025, and a
Mhm.
lot of the thought and build around it is customer hosted and enabling those that are very passionate in very specific cities. Um, that can be challenging in its own right, but the idea is that it's at their site saving a lot of money. And really, we're just there to kind of um, create a plan that's scalable, kind of monitor and recruit and train the hosts, if you will, but not in charge of running every event. Like it's meant
Yeah.
to, we're trying to like be Johnny Appleseed a little bit with these, and like we're gonna have to force it in some cases, at least initially, but then using our other customer events and things like that to announce it and to drive and solicit volunteers to be hosts, because we can tell there's a passion and a need. We just need to organize that. And it's kind of how our approach to it. Very different from like, this is the user group in Canada, this is the user group in California. We're paying for everything, we're inviting everybody, and it just becomes miniature customer events. Um, yeah, that's the model we're trying to take. Whether or not it's successful, we'll see. But
Is your community only customers, or is it a blend of customers and prospects?
the communities of practice would be customers only. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we have a really large community, but it's not a customer only community, and we do host a lot of like we have chapters
Mm.
across the globe. But I think that's kind of our next step of where we want to go in terms of like carving out like a customer focused communities within the larger community.
Yeah.
Ryan, I saw you go off mute. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of events, I was going to share what we're focusing on for next year. Um, Primarily, those efforts are being led by our DG team and are inclusive of like customer and prospects. So we have our customer, I think it's going to possibly be renamed, but CuriosityCon that's going to be happening next year. We're also focusing on kind of like quarterly tentpole moments by persona. And so getting both customers and prospects invited to those are all going to be virtual. Our strategy is heavily changing to not be in person.
Hmm.
Um, so we're primarily only going to be running virtual events. We do quarterly like what's new webinars. Like I think those are pretty
Mhm.
standard in terms of like expansion type activities. And then we have, Shetal, you might be more familiar with some of the older versions of this, but like kind of program that my team is running now that we're trying to get off the ground is a Mind the Base initiative of like thinking about different ways to who are the right folks that we want to see user movement from within our customer base,
Yeah.
and moving those primarily to our enterprise product. And that has had various iterations of it over the years. And this is the newest version of it. So I would love to connect at some point and learn more about what you know about all of that from the past.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with you to see how you're how it's evolved. Yeah, the Mind the Base initiatives and SurveyMonkey has such a gold mine of users and data from like the PLG space. So it's kind of a I don't know advantage in my opinion in some ways of trying to kind of mine the base to your point. I'm interested to hear like the virtual versus in person. You said you guys are moving like mainly because I mean we've done quite a bit of we're mainly virtual as well, but we're noticing that it's from a DG perspective, like virtual was always kind of top of mind, but uh, I feel like on the customer side, I keep hearing like in person is really like the way to like make the connections and build, advocates, et cetera. But it sounds like we're all kind of having similar challenges of like getting folks in person. So curious to if there's
Correct.
like a reason.
Yeah, I mean, to be very transparent, it's mostly on spend,
Yeah,
spend to ROI,
that makes sense.
and the fact that right now that there's a lot more appetite, especially, SurveyMonkey has millions of customers. It's almost the challenges of those, especially like we have the self-serve and sales assisted side of the business. Sales assisted, much easier. Our CS team has great relationships, easier to like build those connections and, support customers there. Self-serve, it's almost a problem of scale of trying to make sure we can do the most things for the most people at once, and identifying the right customers to kind of tell their stories or, identify, like I said, for expansion purposes, what are the best like use case patterns, feature usage, package
Yeah.
types, things like that. And while we do have a lot of data, sometimes the data I don't think is we're moving towards a more cohesive, I think, usage of that data and getting the right data together in the right ways to make decisions. And then also working a little bit more just like cross departmental, because I think that's one thing that it's really hard if you're the one person, one group in marketing that's trying to like do something in particular, but sales is off doing their own thing and CS is off doing their own thing. We're trying to move to a more initiative-based planning process so that we're planning all of these things across the group where we're all doing, we pick one thing and then we all kind of work towards like what are our different like outputs from each group related to that, but we're kind of all working in a really similar way with similar goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're also trying to do that, but more from an account-based perspective, on both the customer and the new logo side. So we're in a similar situation where, sales was off, focusing on a group of accounts to expand. Marketing's focusing on another set of accounts to expand. There's overlap there for sure, but trying to create segments that we can go after as a team. So like, how do we accelerate opportunities? How do we expand specific accounts? How do we, protect and retain additional accounts or other accounts? And then there's like a whole other adoption motion that I don't lead that effort, but definitely collaborating on that. So we're trying to chunk out our accounts, our customers in that way, where it's acceleration, expansion, retention, and then adoption. With a goal of everybody's kind of moving together in the same motion. But it takes quite a bit of work, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is getting everybody aligned on focusing the same, focusing on the same thing at the same time. So yeah, definitely similar story here.
So as an aside, I know this is not the point of the call, but I did just Slack Morgan Lehman and she was like, tell her hi for me.
Oh yes, I love Morgan. Morgan and I worked really closely together, and yeah, she's a star. Tell her I said hello.
I will. She's my manager now, so.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Yeah, she's amazing. She's full of knowledge. Yeah, tell her that we need to meet up at Fieldwork. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because I'm working on my approach to customer roundtables and how that can be used in, starting community for companies and like just doing all of these different types of campaigns and things like that, even expansion. So I'm wondering if there's a way to offer some kind of discussions, like customer discussions around certain topics that are indicative of some kind of expansion. Because what I found is that one, I may start that effort and only get a few people interested, or maybe you send it out to customers and you get 50 people that say they're interested in coming to the call and just having this discussion with other customers, and 6 show up. But even getting just those few people to show up, that's kind of like that, not low hanging fruit, but it's like it gives you something to start with to say, hey, we're building some community aspect here around this topic. And, this is what we talked about on the call. This is where you can connect with the other people, like just their LinkedIn URLs. And this is what, people talked about in those calls, maybe with or without recordings. And here's where you can sign up for the next call. Has helped like increase those numbers over time to, one, build the relationship yourself if you want to do that, but also to really help customers connect in a way that's, I say it's low investment because you're starting off with just the segments of customers that you really need to move and help them go to the next step, but also giving them more resources and opportunities to connect right on the computer with learning from what other customers have to share and um, like being able to listen in or read up on what others have said seems to help get them more interested instead of just hearing, oh, this is what, our customers say in general, saying this is what James said instead. Um, I feel like that could help with some campaigns and has a low enough lift that you can
Mm.
be very specific about the segmentation and
Hmm.
getting that started. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that idea. Let me like play it back just so I make sure I understand what you're saying. So we've done customer roundtables let me back up. We've done roundtables for customers that are very intimate, that are really value-based content. It's more around like value realization, but with a thought leadership aspect to it. So not really selling product, but indirectly selling, right? Because we're talking about, the value of having X product.
Hmm.
Um, and we've also had similar types of roundtables where it's essentially a customer talking about, their experience. For instance, we our employee experience. So employee engagement is our, uh, bread and butter, but we're trying to upsell to our performance management solution. So we'll have a customer talking about, like how they implemented that change and how they went through the change management process within their organization. And it becomes more of like this type of a conversation where they're talking about, what they went through and people can ask questions. But are you saying kind of doing that version, but but in more of like a community aspect? So like kind of carving out community segments to have these like kind of more frequent touch bases. Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, if you're going into it and you're thinking, okay, we have this group of people that we really want to move them into this performance program that we have, or this additional product that we have, like offering some kind of community aspect
Hmm.
of connect each month, talking about these topics and using the information from those conversations to kind of feel out where those customers are. I mean, basically, it can give you a lot of feedback. It can give
Yeah.
you a lot of insight into where the customers in a segment are. And it can also be used to educate the other customers that want to learn from each other or hear what other customers say instead of just what their account manager or what someone is saying. So I guess I'm saying like strategically choosing the
Yeah.
segment and the topic for these customers and calling it a community opportunity where they get to connect with each other, but also using that as a business to get the
Yeah.
information you need and look for those opportunities.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so I don't manage our community, but I know, like I had mentioned earlier, our community is very large. And I know we have like our channel does have like a customer only section. I don't know, to my knowledge, I don't believe we're running these. But I think that is something so just for context, our community team has sat with brand, but they're moving to the customer marketing team. So I think that that's definitely um, something that we'll probably start thinking about. So that's a good idea. Definitely we'll bring it to the team.
Yeah, and I think you can call it, you can say, well, I'd like to get this type of customer together for the next quarter, like once a month for the next quarter, and
Hmm.
kind of give them a little boost of community. But I really want it to be around, um, learning more about this topic and getting more feedback from the customers. Basically, I'm saying you can play with the idea of it enough to where you don't have to say, okay, this kind of belongs to the community team
Yeah, for
where
sure.
I mean, I've had people say, well, I don't think my manager would let me do this because we're really focused on getting customer stories. Well, if you're focused on getting customer stories, this is a great opportunity to spend 1 hour and learn from several customers at once where they are with their experiences. So play with it, play with the idea of it and how you can get what you need from the calls.
Yeah.
If you want to work around it being a community thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a good call out.
Related to all this too is what we're struggling with in retention marketing is measuring at a deeper level. So getting beyond the vanity metrics of like clicks in an email and registrations at webinars, which is great and all, but like, are they impacting adoption? Are they affecting revenue or not? Like and trying to figure out how to report on that is tricky. I'm wondering if anyone has solved that or has any unique approaches to that puzzle.
Do you know who specifically you're looking at for increasing adoption? Is it just all customers, all segments, or what?
Well, certainly, we have more focus on certain products and certain
Mm.
segments, but I feel like we're monitoring it right now to kind of give you how we're approaching it or how we're collecting information. They're in Salesforce campaigns, so all of our
Hmm.
retention programs are run through Marketo and linking back in, as members in a campaign. We
Yeah.
also have some really strong, luckily, Power BI dashboards on product usage, license utilization, things like that that not everybody has. So in my mind, it's trying to marriage those two and overlay them in a way that actually tells a story and that is true. Um, that's the trick. But then like limitations on campaign tagging, right? We can't really filter and run deeper analytics on a Salesforce campaign necessarily, but I suppose you can try to like think through it now. Like if an account or a contact is in a campaign, you can just run a filter that if they're a campaign member, yes, then apply the account filters like solution and product and everything like that in industry. Um, but yeah, I know
Yeah.
I kind of rambled a bit there, but
We're in the same boat, James, like trying to figure out. So I hold a pipeline number, so I
mm,
have to drive to a pipeline number, but this quarter or 2025, we're also adding an additional KPI of engagement metrics because we are running retention plays out in addition to expansion. And it's super manual right now because it's like, okay, we can do a look and we don't even, I mean, we use Salesforce, but our campaigns, it, well, I won't get into the details of that
sure.
yet because it's just it's a
I follow you.
I
Yeah.
could have like a whole hour-long conversation on that. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer. I'm also thinking out loud, but like the way that we're thinking through it right now and is like, okay, we have 6sense that we use as an ABM platform. So if we have these segments of accounts that we're trying to retain, we can measure engagement within that platform. And engagement is basically like them, you know, uh, interacting with our content or sales outreach, but that's just like one view of engagement, right? So the other thing is like, is this cohort of accounts, are they attending events? Are they um interacting with or converting on our emails? And so like we're trying to list all the different criterias that we're saying, okay, this means
Mm,
engagement. And so we also have like for these specifically to retention, we are targeting uh, it's essentially like a mood. So if they're in orange mood, they're at risk of churning. And so we're trying to retain them. And so then if we take that cohort and look past their renewal date, did they renew, and B, did they go from orange to green?
mm,
So like those are other metrics that we're looking at, but how to like do this in a non-manual way is a
mm.
is the challenge. Um, so I'm also very curious. And then also like engagement. from a pipeline creation perspective. So like using as a leading indicator, right? So like they've done all these things. They've engaged, they've attended webinars, they're opening our emails, they're clicking our emails, they're responding to sales outreach. If we see that type of engagement, can we say in future quarters that that's also going to help us drive pipeline? But I mean, I know that doesn't answer your question, but we're also trying to like figure out a way to measure engagement and then renewals and then
The true
pipeline.
impact of engagement, right? Essentially, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I know. I feel like if someone can crack that nut.
Yeah, that's hard. I think like what you're talking about, I one thing that comes to mind is, you know, what do the ideal accounts look like, and how does a segment of those compare, like the ones that have recently renewed? What
Mm,
is different? What really stands out about them? What is their engagement like? What's their email? Like all of that. So having that ideal account idea in place to know what that is. You already know what your goal is, like looking at that. If they have an orange face, then they could churn. So knowing what your goal is too, I mean, I think that's obviously really helpful when you're looking at this, like, okay, how can we tell if the engagement is working, if it's making a difference or not? If you have enough accounts, I think comparing it back to those ideal accounts that have closed is helpful. And then I would say talking to the different people in your marketing ops, which of course is going to be, building out that relationship and spending time with them, but they tend to know more about how to bring those stats and things like that together in a place where you will be able to see what's going on. So I found that either talking to them or the Salesforce admins and being like, hey, what information is available and where can I bring this all together? Where can I see what I need to see? Um, is helpful.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm not saying that I know all of these things.
No,
I'm
yeah,
saying
it makes sense though. Like, I think too,
yeah.
as I newer to managing the team, um, my approach to it is like, well, let's look at the knot from every angle.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as, too much insight. So that's kind of where I'm at, is like gathering as much insight as I can.
Yeah.
And then figuring out, okay, what systems do we have available to put these pieces together? Luckily, we have Power BI. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is a huge boon. I've never worked at a company that's had such a strong set of product usage data, and it would be impossible without that. So it then becomes a much easier problem of like putting them together so they speak together, in my opinion, because otherwise it's just, if you don't have the data, then you're stuck.
Mhm.
You're forced to
Yeah.
rely on Salesforce opportunities closures, which is great and all, right? Like that, at least that's an end state that you can claim.
Yeah.
And then it's a marketing
Yeah.
exercise, right? Like, well, that's influence on this opportunity. But yeah, I think too, like the team has been like such a well-oiled machine when it comes to running great webinars and doing things, but like then protecting themselves a bit. And so like me putting them out there and reminding people that this is what retention does, and drawing their work directly to actual impact is kind of
Impact.
as the new
Yeah.
leader, like my goal for the next year. And it's going to make them feel better about their work. It's going to make the company feel more connected, and feel proud of what they're doing. And they're working hard, but it's like, are
Yeah.
these numbers on webinar attendance actually good numbers? Are they actually helping in any way when it comes to retention and adoption? Like that's the question. So
And do you
Yeah.
have
I
like
mean,
a, oh, sorry. Go
no, no,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you have like a customer journey view where you can see what the customer has done over time. One of the
mm,
things that Daniel Pele from Grafana Lab says, the way that they show a lot of times their impact is by showing the touch points the customers take, and how their team has provided a lot of that content or the things that customers need to, progress over time. So I think that's interesting to look at too.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think about the priorities as well. Like maybe that's the wrong word, but like looking at each of these metrics and being like, how important is this aspect? Like, okay, they're coming to webinars. Are we looking at, comparing accounts that have gone to a lot of webinars and seeing that those accounts generally have this, you know, they progress over time, they have a higher retention rate, they
Mm-hmm.
buy more from the company? Or, and if so, is there a specific reason, like what's in these calls that makes them, show up and makes them progress over time? Or is it, just some, what's it, causation, correlation
Right.
type of thing? But really just what are these numbers that we're looking at? Are they important at all? And that's kind of why I like Daniel's approach of the touch points and looking at that, because over time you can start to compare those accounts and say, these accounts that have at least looked at case studies or at least have gone to X many webinars are X more likely to do whatever we need them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was at an EBM conference earlier this week, and it was a similar, like they were talking about engagement models, and one of the things that they talked about was, I think, similar to what you were saying, Mary, is like look at all the different, so like if you have a cohort of accounts that you're trying to retain, like look at all of the different marketing touch points, then looking at the CS and sales touch points. And then those are all individual account or contacts. And then how does it roll into the like account group or buying stages, right? Or I'm sorry, buying group of that account. Um, and then eventually uncovering the patterns of like, okay, did those accounts renew versus not renew? And what are those what are there commonalities of accounts that renewed versus didn't renew? But again, it goes back to like your initial question is how do you triangulate all that data in a meaningful way? If you do figure it out, since that's kind of your charter for your team, I would love to like learn from you. So yeah, like if once you do kind of crack that nut for your team, I would love to get your insights on that.
Okay. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah,
James,
thank you.
have you ever talked to Ari Hoffman?
Yes.
Okay.
At some
He
point over the past 6 years, yes.
We all have.
Yeah, I think so, probably. Yeah.
Ari is really good at the business metrics and
Mm,
like the data side of these things and like looking at the different deltas between all these different metrics and things. Um, it might be worth reaching out to him and talking to him and even connecting on a couple of calls because I've gone back and looked at some of the calls I've had with him or calls that he's done publicly, and
mm.
he does a lot in the data and the metrics and bringing business points together and stuff, and I think he might be helpful for what you're talking about.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. What other topics do we have today, Shetal?
I don't know. I was gonna see how much time we have. We only have a few more minutes. So any other like pressing topics that anyone want to bring up or anything that you're working on that's challenging or working that you'd like to share?
Well,
Or in
I'm
the
curious, like joined the CMA weekly community just the other week. This is my first of these types of calls. Is this every Friday at 9 Pacific? Or
This is our monthly expansion call that
oh, okay.
Shetal hosts every month. And then 2 p.m. Eastern is our weekly call. This
Okay.
week we're going to hear from the finalists for the CAP Awards for the advocacy brand. And those basically it's building out the advocacy programs that are very closely matched to the brands and, all of that fun creative stuff that gets people excited about the advocacy programs they have.
I'm going to add some placeholders so I don't lose sight of both of them. Thank you.
Shetal, what are you working on?
I am working on 2025 planning, which is a beast. So we are kind of, as an organization, we're moving into a kind of more of an always on account based motion. So we're really focusing on, creating this like constant nurture and air cover and like life cycle motion for our account. So we're focusing on that on the new logo side and then on the expansion retention side as well. So as I had mentioned, like we've chunked out segments based on like stage, right? So if they're in an open opportunity, expansion opportunity, what are the plays that we're running to that set of accounts? And then accounts that are ready to add product, so expansion, and then retention, so customers that are at risk of churning, and then adoption. And so we have, like targeting criteria of how one account would enter into that segment. So, for example, employee size, if they've activated their product, so they're actually using our product. They're, depending on the mood, for if they're a green mood or an orange mood, that's a retention play. Open opportunity versus not an open opportunity. So we have a bunch of different criteria that make up these segments. And then we also layering on intent. So for instance, for the retention segment, if we use 6 Sense, as I mentioned. So if those accounts are searching for competitor keywords, we'll layer on that intent on top of them. If we're trying to expand and they're showing intent for for keywords that are related to our additional products, we'll layer onto them. And so the idea is we have these segments throughout the year and quarters, and then we run these like air cover plays. So we use email as a main form of communication. So we'll have like email nurtures, and the messaging changes based on which segment they are in. So for instance, if it's, retention, it's all around value realization. If it's expansion, it's, still value based, but, more about, the benefits of that product, et cetera. If it's acceleration, it's more around like third-party validation, customer stories, et cetera. And so the idea is to nurture these accounts throughout a certain time frame with this content. And then we also layer on ads. So we work with our paid digital team to target these accounts with ads around this certain topics. We're also leveraging Sendoso for our gifting platform. So our account managers have a budget that they can leverage to gift these accounts. And then events is a big part of the strategy. So we work closely with our field marketing team in each region to make sure that there are events that either make sense for each of these segments or are specific for these segments. And so that's the idea. And then also working really closely with our outbound specialists on making sure that any of the messaging our account managers are sending out across these and CS managers across these different segments are also aligned to the similar type of messaging. And so that's our big picture for 2025. And that's kind of how we're trying to kind of change our like go-to-market strategy. And so, yeah, we'll see how it goes in theory once we get to the execution phase. But that's kind of how we're instead of kind of doing ad hoc campaigns, we're trying to create this like global kind of always on segmentation, and then have our regional marketing teams come in and input any kind of regionalization that they need.
I'm really glad you shared all that because we're doing the same. Like we're trying like
Oh,
meeting next
cool.
Monday as a cross-functional team to like, okay, retention plays.
Yeah.
We need to create retention plays so that there's pre-packaged content for certain segment like strategic accounts that are up for renewal next year. That we just start hitting exec sponsors and like, well, we have so much to talk about, but like thinking about those same problems. So you gave me 5 ideas already, like to come to that meeting. So I appreciate you sharing them.
Oh, that's awesome. What kind of content are you thinking about in terms of those plays? I'm curious if you have
Well,
any ideas.
naturally, since would be retention focused. So what you said about ROI messaging and the value
Mhm.
realization makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I coming into that call, this will be the first cross-functional call. So
Got
coming
it.
in, I'm really excited that you added the layer about existing open expansion opportunities. I hadn't thought about that, and it's something that if not, I'll bring up. Like, hey, we can't just treat every upcoming renewal the same. We need to think about if there's an expansion op that's set to close the same year. Is this
Yeah.
really like, do we want to mess with that? Like they're clearly
Yeah,
they're gonna retain if they're gonna buy more. Like let's think about
totally.
things like let's at least consider that. I think that was huge. We also have
Yeah.
Alice and Sendo, so but
Okay.
we're not like it's very demand gen or advocacy reward focused.
Totally.
I'll bring it to the table like, hey, do we want to put some funds in Alice specifically for these for this campaign? Things
Yeah.
like that. Like you've really helped a lot quickly.
Oh,
In 2
I'm
minutes,
glad
you
the
gave me a lot of great
last two
ideas.
minutes of the call.
It's
Sometimes
just great
these calls
timing,
do
right?
that
Like,
though. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's one thing I do like about these calls is like sometimes someone will say something and you're like, oh wow, I didn't like, or it's like validating as well
Yeah.
because you're like, I'm thinking about that as well. So yeah, that's why I
Mhm.
love these small groups because we can kind of talk through stuff
I
like
think
this.
we're in enterprise software. We're kind of 2025 is not a year of growth. It's a year of retention. So yeah,
Totally.
we're probably all
Yeah.
thinking along the same lines. So.
I know, and I keep talking to my VP about our goals because like it's retention is a big play for everyone in SaaS, right? Especially in enterprise SaaS to your point. But we're beholden to this like pipeline number. So we always prioritize our pipeline expansion plays, but it's like I'm always like, well, you can't expand if you don't retain. So you have to retain before you can expand. And so it's this like constant battle. But yeah, I think that the biggest area that I'm finding challenge is on those retention plays, like how to measure it, kind of
Mhm.
similar to what you were saying before. And so obviously we know it's a longer game, right? Because like sometimes renewals are not for another 6 months. So it's like really hard to
Mhm.
see the impact of your work in quarter. But like, what are the other like engagement metrics, like we were talking about, or
Mhm.
additional kind of metrics that we can say, okay, this is what is we're doing these retention plays and it's creating an impact. So
Right. I mean,
yeah,
I would,
luckily we have the benefit of a renewal opportunity with the close date and like
yeah,
all of that that goes into it, right? Which versus adoption for an account that
yeah,
will renew in 6 years. Like that's
yeah,
so much harder to claim influence on. But a
totally,
renewal op and a set play, and we know that we activated on it, and we know this person can, like our executive buyer at this account engaged with this play over the
yeah,
past 4 months, and they renewed. We can call that at least it's work. Like there's other aspects to why they renewed.
yeah,
But we, knowing that, taking a look at that and say everybody who we ran this play for renewed.
renewed, yeah,
Some of these that we didn't run this play for didn't renew. Like we could kind of
totally,
claim influence, but
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
since you both brought up like James brought up cross collaboration. One thing I would say is that if you're not looking a lot at the advocacy side and maybe even the types of
Mhm.
advocates and where their accounts are, because people that participate in communities and advocates or advocacy programs tend to have higher retention.
mhm.
There's signals that you can get from your communities, from your advocacy managers and programs that you can use in those retention plays. And just like, again, comparing them to the accounts that do not participate and things like that. So I would just keep that in mind as you're going into your cross collaboration call next week.
Yeah, I mean, I have the benefit of managing both teams, so and
Yeah,
coming from
nice.
the advocacy side, I definitely agree with everything you just said. But then thinking too, like if we had not just a goal to retain and renew the customer, but also a goal if they're not an advocate when we began, are they an advocate when we ended? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
using recruitment of an advocacy, or like has the program flipped from in progress or recruiting or not yet asked to active? That's a success point
Yeah.
Yeah.
that we
And
can shoot for or claim, right?
That's a
So
good point. That's a
and
good
Laura
idea.
Ramos from Forrester talks about there's 4 types of advocates. And I have found that putting that the type of advocate that they are in your like in your Salesforce, in your data, and keeping track of that is helpful because it shows what that user's goals are
hmm.
for not just participating in your advocacy plans, but like what their goals are for their career and how you can use that is really helpful when you go back and look at those things and you're like, okay, how can we help this person with retention and help them with their career? Because if you're going to help them with their career, then they're
Hmm.
going to have more of that loyalty to you. So
What
if
was
you're
that analyst's name?
not keeping track of it, yeah, Laura Ramos. And
Laura.
yeah,
Okay.
if your teams aren't keeping track of those types of advocates,
Mhm.
I'd just be like, hey, we should really look into this. And I have a couple charts and things I've made from it based on my own experience that I can send along
Sure,
after
that'd
the
be great.
call.
Thank you.
This has been
Awesome.
such a great call. I
They're not
even
all like this because I was really
yeah,
excited. Like I picked the right. I
Yeah,
really
I
like the
mean
CMA.
these are monthly, and so I love the small group personally. I think it's always like a nice one to come to the table with. I tell Mary like one day I'm gonna come to the table with like a actual like presentation, but I never get around to doing it. I actually prefer this though because I think it's just better to come, trade ideas and try to tackle challenges. I think the one challenge that I continue to realize that nobody's cracked is reporting. I feel like there was one call a while ago that we had that we spent the entire call talking about how people report and everyone reports in a different way and everyone has challenges. So,
that's a
yeah,
good
so
indication that shows that each of the companies were all different, all the
Mm,
ways that
yeah,
you work cross collaboratively and everything else with the leadership and the tools that you have. I think it is individualistic because it's very hard to replicate what
yeah,
what somebody else has.
yeah, but it's also nice to like understand what others are doing so that you can
Yeah.
kind of bring that to your team. But yeah, James, I'm curious to hear how you progress in that from an engagement perspective. Keep me posted. But
will do.
otherwise, I think this is a month from today, or maybe I think I don't
December
remember.
13th.
December 13th. Cool.
Yeah. And
I
there's
think it
always the community. We can talk in a group in the community or a specific channel, whatever works for everyone.
sounds good.
All right. Thank you,
Well,
Shetal. Thank you,
thanks.
James and
Yeah, thanks
Colleen.
everyone.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
nice
Thank you.
Have a
weekend.
great
You
week.
too.
Bye.
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 Bye.